Morning, everybody. Yep, that's how long we've been in lockdown. I've come round to speak again, so it's bad news for everybody, I think. It was a nice intro with the Waymaker song about God being a promise keeper. Because what I've been sort of drawn to recently is the story of Joseph. It was interesting, a couple of weeks ago when Andy spoke, he mentioned Joseph as well, so that sort of pricked my ears up. And I've come to the story. This is the Old Testament one with these sort of multicolored coats. So I've come through to it a couple of ways in different contexts. So it's a fairly well-known story. So I'm not going to read it all out because I think it's about 10 chapters in the Bible, and that would be the end of Sunday, let alone the Sunday service. It's fairly well known. I'm sure most of us have either read it in the Bible or seen the Lloyd Webber, Tim Rice musical about Joseph. As I think I've said in the past, one of my claims to fame is that I played Joseph in the primary school play. So maybe I should have been taking a bit more notice of it then, let alone now. To roughly recap, Joseph was the favourite son and had dreams about the rest of the family bowing down to him. And things like that really don't go down very well if you say you're going to be better than everybody else, you know. So it caused a lot of jealousy and hatred in the family. And his brothers plotted to kill him, but ended up just selling him off into slavery, where he went to Egypt and was sold into the house of Potiphar, where he became really successful and led the household until Potiphar's wife decided that she'd like to have a bit more personal time with Joseph, which he wasn't keen on. So he got thrown into jail after her allegations against him, where he was again successful in the jail, and the jailer left him to virtually run the place. He interpreted dreams for a couple of people in the jail that the interpretations came about, and one of them went out and after a couple of years remembered him and told Pharaoh about Joseph when Pharaoh was having some disturbing dreams. And he was let out and he reorganized the country of Egypt and was eventually reunited with his family. And all the way through that, God was blessing him and was with him, and everything he did was good because God was with him. And it's a real story of God's love, God's faithfulness, God keeping his promises that he made to Joseph, and God also working through difficult situations, adversaries, setbacks, things that would have made Joseph despair and give up hope, but God was still there. And Joseph started off as somebody fairly immature, you know, anybody that goes around telling everybody that he's going to be better than them. It's not the wisest thing to do, but through it, God changed him. God made him grow, develop. He learned things. He learned how to do things well. Joseph lost everything that he thought was important, but gained what really was the important things for him. And I want to pick the story up in Genesis 41, verses 25 to 36. So this is when Joseph is actually interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of corn are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterwards are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless ears of corn, scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of those good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh, to be kept in cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. So Joseph had gone through a lot to get to the stage where he could interpret Pharaoh's dreams. And in some ways, there's a bit of similarity to the times then and the times now. It's a time of great change, things being different, things moving. Many of us actually can feel like we've been locked up for a crime that we've not committed, just as Joseph was. Joseph in his time probably felt abandoned by everyone, by God, by family, by dreams, by Potiphar, by the cupbearer who he asked to help to get him out of there. He got no one around to help and support him. And then we come to Pharaoh's dreams about times of plenty and times of famine. Now, just for the record, I'm not just talking about food here. I'm talking about the spiritual, the mental, the emotional, the social things that we're going through at the moment, rather than necessarily times of food and things like that. And it's a time when the world changed as a result of the famine. And maybe there's a bit of a similarity there for us. Maybe for some of them, this feels like a time of plenty. It's a time when we can pray more, we can read more, we can reprioritize our lives, and we get a focus to our lives. We can stock up our lives, just as during the times of plenty, Egypt was able to build up stockpiles and storehouses that were being filled. And it's a time for us where we've maybe been able to take that time. And although it's not been great and wonderful, it does give us that time to reflect and to move on and to stock up. But for others, we're probably feeling that we're in the middle of that famine, that there is no fruit, that life's difficult. And that could be emotionally, spiritually, financially, mentally. Our storehouse is empty or emptying, and it's a really tough and difficult time for us. And maybe the stuff that we'd already stocked up on has been used up. And maybe what was there wasn't sufficient. Maybe it wasn't nourishing and long lasting. And now there's the time when we can actually think about how we want to restock up, re-get our storehouses full. But the important thing is, however you are feeling at the moment, is to be kind to yourself and to kind to others. Because if you are going through these tough times, it's easy to beat yourselves up and to blame yourselves and to think about all the bad things about yourself. Whereas just taking time to be kind to ourselves, to allow God's love to fill those gaps, to make up those things that are missing and that we're feeling empty of. And if we are one of the ones who are not doing too bad at this moment, who maybe feel that we're at a time when we can build things up, maybe it's a time to be kind to others, because we don't know how others are feeling. They might not be coping as well as you feel you are. So there's a lot to be said for just being kind to ourselves and being kind to others. Because never mind what's going on, God's love is absolute. And God wants to be kind to us. God is trying to share his love with us, to be kind. And it's just a case of sharing that out. Egypt's is one of these sort of often used metaphors in the Bible. And it's a place where people went into for refuge and came out of because of problems. And again, it might be something that you need a place to go for refuge at the moment, or there's things that you need to come out of. Israel went in for refuge from the famine, and then a bit later on had to come out as part of the Exodus story. Jesus and Abraham both went to Egypt as places of refuge, but then came out when the time was right. So are we sitting in a time where we need to find refuge, or do we need to come out? I know we all want to go out a bit. There's us desperate to go out and see others. But then we have got to decide what we're going to go out to. What do we want to go out to? What will the place be like? How are things changing? Egypt became almost a place of light for the rest of the world. When the famine hit, everybody went to Egypt for food because of what it'd done. And as we are starting to come out of the lockdown, we need to make sure that we're lights that people are drawn to, that we're there for people, both as a church and individually. For Joseph, this is also a time of change. Lots of different things were happening to Joseph. He went from Canaan to Egypt. He went from being a slave to being in favor, and then out of favor, and then back in favor, and then in jail, where he became in favor again, to being forgotten, to finally being in favor by Pharaoh and most of the world. He was in and out of favor with his family, and his relationship with them changed. It went from the jealousy and the hatred, the fear and the grief that they went through, to love and compassion and being reunited. And probably most of his time in Egypt, he wanted to go back to Canaan. Joseph would have wanted to go back to what he thought was normal, what he thought life was like beforehand. But Joseph and the world was changing. The world around him was changing. And what was normal to Joseph wasn't going to survive. It wasn't going to be there. And there's lots of talk now about us going back to normal, getting back to the way things were. And sometimes we look back on the past with rose-colored spectacles. And for many, what was normal beforehand wasn't necessarily great. We know that there was injustice in the world. We just look at Zimbabwe and the situation there, inequality, where celebrities were thought of as great rather than people that make a real difference at the moment. People like the key workers that we're all recognizing on the Thursday night. There was a great story told of one of the press conferences in Spain where a journalist asked a scientist why it's taking so long to develop a vaccine. And he said, you pay your sports stars $1 million or €1 million a month for what they do, and you give scientists €1,800 a month. Go ask Cristiano Ronaldo to develop the vaccine. You obviously think he's more important than us. The people that are really important to make a difference in our lives are not necessarily the ones that are being recognized in the past. And we've got a chance now to create a new normal, what we want the world to be like. Certainly for ourselves individually, but maybe we can start to influence society too, to make it a better place. Individually, we're probably aware of good habits that we've maybe developed in this time that are good to continue. Maybe things that have dropped off that maybe weren't so good. Maybe things that we recognize now that we need to stop. Maybe we think about the diet that we've got to build ourselves up. What's going to put things into our storehouse for our life rather than deplete us? What builds us up rather than takes things away from us? And how do we become the light for people? How do we become the places where people flock to? I'm sure we've all discovered things about ourselves that we like and don't like. What are we willing to let God change in us? How we let him develop us. We speak a lot about becoming the best that we can in God. What change are we allowing him to develop and build in our lives? If this has been your time of stocking up, of building up, what are you going to do with that? What do we do with what God's given us at the moment? If this has been your time of famine, how do you then stock up? How do you change and become the best that you can? Now, this may have been complete nonsense to people listening. There are ideas that are developing, and there's some of it that makes sense to me, some of it I need to work on, but maybe it's something that's been triggered with you, something that you need to take to God in prayer, to think through, to pray through. Maybe you just recognize that you are in that time of famine and you need some help and some support, that you need to maybe speak to somebody that you know or trust, just to talk things through, to pray things through with people. Just because we've been forced into this physical, social isolation doesn't mean that we're cut off from everybody. It's been great that we're able to meet together, to join each other in community and church on Sundays and through the week. We need to develop that and make sure that we are developing ourselves, keeping contact with people, being open and honest. We'll shortly be allowed to get out, to meet people, to go out into the big, wild, scary world. And we've got to make that time real, willing to share how it's been for us, how difficult at times it's been. I've noticed really on Thursdays are my difficult day. I don't know why. It's partway through the week and I just get really down and struggle through Thursdays. Friday's not too bad because you've got the weekend coming through, but there's just something about Thursday that just seems to be the weight of the world falling on you. You know, we need to be honest that even though maybe through some of it we've been okay, that there have been times that have been difficult, and be willing to be honest and real with people. We've got the chance to change things around us, to make a new normal, to become the best that we can in God. Let's take that chance as we go out into this real world and be real people for people. Amen.